In a world filled with logic and reason, there are moments that defy explanation. Moments where the impossible unfolds before our very eyes. Some call them miracles. Others dismiss them as mere coincidences. But what if they were something more? A child on the brink of death. Doctors with no answers. Hope fading with each passing second. But then, something happened. Something no one could explain. Four unknown men appeared out of nowhere. No names. No past. No explanation. And what they did next would leave you in awe. Who were they? Doctors? Mysterious benefactors? Or something beyond human comprehension? The only thing certain was that they came with a mission. And just as mysteriously as they arrived, they vanished. Before we take you on this thought-provoking journey, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button below and join our story-loving community. Like and share with friends who love good tales. In the heart of Lagos, where the symphony of honking Danfo buses clashed with the relentless calls of street hawkers, lived a couple whose love had withstood the test of time, Jide and Chidinma. They were known for their unquenchable desire to help and support the poor. They often went out of their way to ensure that the children of every indigent family in their immediate community are never out of school. For 23 years, their marriage had been a tapestry woven with laughter, resilience, and silent prayers whispered into the void of unanswered longing. Their home, though warm with companionship, bore the haunting echo of an absent child. Chidinma, a gifted schoolteacher, spent her days shaping the minds of other people's children, while Jide, a senior banker, drowned himself in the monotony of work, using deadlines and numbers to mask the aching emptiness that lurked in his soul. Their nights were filled with fervent prayers, hands clasped so tightly in faith that their knuckles turned white. Yet, year after year, the cradle in their home remained untouched, gathering dust like an unfulfilled prophecy. Then, when hope had become a fragile whisper, when even their most devoted well-wishers had stopped asking, a miracle unfolded. Chidinma conceived. The news spread like a harmattan fire, igniting waves of disbelief and joy. The pregnancy was delicate, a dance between faith and fragility, yet she bore it with the quiet strength of a warrior. And on a dewy Lagos morning, as the city stirred awake with the cacophony of 1,000 restless souls, she brought forth life, a son, Obi. Laughter spilled into their home like sunlight breaking through darkened skies. Neighbors flocked to celebrate, church members wept in awe, and for the first time in decades, the silence in their house was drowned by the gurgles and cries of a child. Obi was their answered prayer, the living proof that faith was never in vain. But just as their world settled into bliss, a shadow lurked beyond the horizon, waiting. Ready to shatter their newfound joy in ways no one could ever predict. Obi was barely a year old when the first signs appeared. His once vibrant skin paled, his energy dwindled, and his tiny heart seemed to beat with the weight of an unseen burden. At first, they dismissed it as the common flu, but when his breathing became labored, panic set in. Chidinma and Jide rushed him to a private hospital, where doctors ran a series of tests. The results were devastating. Obi had a congenital heart defect, one so severe that he required an urgent transplant. The word struck like lightning. Jide felt his legs weaken, and Chidinma collapsed into tears. How could the same God who had given them this child now place him on the brink of death? The doctor's voice was calm yet merciless. The best option is to take him abroad for surgery. His heart is failing, and we don't have the facilities for such an operation in Nigeria. Jide's mind raced. How could they afford this? They had spent all their savings during Chidinma's high-risk pregnancy, and the cost of surgery abroad was astronomical. But a parent's love knows no bounds. Determined to save their son, they began raising funds, seeking help from friends, family, and their church. Each day, Obi's condition worsened, and time was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. Chidinma, once a woman of poise, became a shadow of herself. Her eyes were swollen from endless crying, and her spirit waned with each doctor's reminder that Obi needed immediate surgery. Jide, a man known for his unshakable strength, found himself breaking down in his car, whispering desperate prayers into the wind. They set up a crowdfunding campaign, knocking on every possible door. Some friends gave, others avoided them. The whispers started, "Why are they begging?" Didn't Jide work in a bank? But pride had no place where a child's life was concerned. With each passing day, the reality became starker. They had exhausted their resources, sold properties, and even Chidinma's treasured wedding jewelry. Yet, they were still far from the required amount. It was in this moment of despair that Jide found himself on his knees in the middle of their living room, crying out to God in a voice so raw that the walls trembled with his grief. "Do not give us a gift only to snatch it away, Lord. Please, send us a miracle." And then, as if the heavens heard his plea, a night of mystery and divine intervention was set into motion. Please don't forget to subscribe to Ubuntu Folktales, hit the subscriber button below, share and drop a comment in the comments section. Thank you so much. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and despair. Chidinma clung to Obi, singing softly, though her voice cracked with sorrow. Jide stood by the window, staring into the city's vast darkness, feeling an abyss of hopelessness swallow him whole. Then, at the stroke of midnight, something peculiar happened. The hospital's security cameras recorded 4 men walking through the entrance. They moved with an air of purpose, their faces calm yet unreadable. They requested to see the hospital's director, and when they were ushered into his office, they made an astounding proposition. "We wish to donate advanced heart transplant equipment to this hospital for 1 week," one of them stated simply. The director, a man of logic, was skeptical. "And what do you want in return?" The tallest among them smiled, his eyes holding a depth unfathomable. "Nothing. Just save lives." The men were given access to the ICU, where they installed the sophisticated machines, setting the stage for an impossible miracle. The doctors, bewildered but desperate, immediately arranged for Obi's surgery. Chidinma and Jide, unaware of the unfolding mystery, held onto each other, praying through the night. By morning, the hospital was a whirlwind of activity. A team of surgeons, armed with newfound hope, wheeled Obi into the operating room. Hours felt like lifetimes as Chidinma and Jide clung to their faith. Then, the moment came, the doors swung open, and the lead surgeon approached them. His face, usually reserved, was overcome with awe. "The surgery was successful," he announced. "Your son will live." Chidinma collapsed into Jide's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Jide, the man who had always prided himself on composure, lifted his hands to the heavens, whispering, "Thank God." But the mystery deepened. The 4 men, as quietly as they had arrived, vanished. They left no name, no contact, no demand for payment. The hospital's director, now a believer in miracles, reviewed the CCTV footage in astonishment. The only evidence of the men's existence was the camera footage and the nurse who attended to them. "Who were they?" she murmured, shaking her head. "Angels?" Jide and Chidinma never got an answer. But as they held Obi's tiny hands, watching his heartbeat stabilize on the monitor, they knew one thing: sometimes, heaven walks among us, unseen yet undeniable. Obi's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. As the days passed, his strength returned, and his laughter once again filled the hospital room. Chidinma and Jide, overwhelmed with gratitude, began asking questions about the 4 mysterious men. They approached the hospital director, the nurses, even security personnel, yet no one had any concrete answers. The only clue remained the grainy footage from the CCTV cameras. The hospital tried running facial recognition searches, but no matches were found. It was as though the men had vanished into thin air. Jide, being a banker with access to investigative tools, reached out to friends in high places, hoping to trace the origins of the heart transplant equipment. However, every lead turned cold. The equipment itself was state-of-the-art, the kind found only in top-tier international hospitals. Chidinma, meanwhile, focused on nursing Obi back to full strength, but she, too, couldn't shake off the mystery. "Who were they?" she often whispered at night, staring at the ceiling. Their priest at church suggested that perhaps they had encountered divine intervention, angels in human form. While Jide struggled to accept such an explanation, Chidinma felt peace in believing that God had sent his messengers in their time of need. But despite their faith, their curiosity refused to fade. They were grateful, but they longed for closure. Who were these men, and why did they choose their son to save? Word spread quickly through the hospital and beyond. Local news outlets picked up the strange case, running headlines such as "The Mystery of the Four Strangers and Angels" or "Good Samaritans." "The Unbelievable Lagos Miracle." People speculated wildly. Some claimed the men were undercover philanthropists, others believed they were foreign specialists testing new medical technology. The wildest theories suggested they were literal angels, disguised as humans. Chidinma's friend, Amaka, was the first to propose something uncanny. "Do you remember when we were still trying to raise funds?" she asked one evening over the phone. "There was an old beggar outside the church who kept telling you, 'Your son will be saved by those you least expect.' You thought he was just mumbling nonsense, but what if?" The memory sent shivers down Chidinma's spine. The old man had indeed seemed oddly certain that Obi would live. She and Jide rushed to the church to look for him, but he was nowhere to be found. No one seemed to remember ever seeing such a beggar before. Jide, ever the realist, refused to jump to supernatural conclusions. "We just need to find them," he muttered. "There has to be a rational explanation." But as the days turned into weeks, no rational explanation came. One night, while Chidinma and Jide were sleeping, a strange breeze swept through their bedroom despite the windows being shut. The air smelled of rain and something else, something sweet and unplaceable. A whisper, barely audible, filled the room. "You are blessed," it said. "Be at peace." Jide sat up with a start, his heart pounding. He looked around, but the room was empty. Chidinma stirred beside him, her face serene. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "I think they're watching over us." The next morning, Chidinma found a small, white feather resting on Obi's hospital bed. The nurse on duty swore no birds had been in the hospital, and no one could explain where it had come from. Chidinma clutched it to her chest, feeling a warmth spread through her. For the first time in months, she felt certain that Obi was truly safe. With Obi's health fully restored, Jide and Chidinma found themselves at a crossroads. They could return to life as before, or they could embrace the miracle that had saved their son and find a way to pay it forward. Jide, inspired by the selflessness of the four strangers, began working on a new project, a foundation to help struggling families access medical care. He reached out to his colleagues, investors, and philanthropists. "If these men could give without expecting anything in return," he said passionately, "then we can do the same." Chidinma, on the other hand, turned to sharing their story. She began speaking at churches and charity events, spreading hope and faith. She often recounted the night of Obi's surgery, describing the mysterious men who had appeared and vanished like whispers in the wind. Sometimes, she would say, angels do not come with wings. Sometimes, they walk among us in human form. Months passed, and life gradually returned to normal. One day, while sorting through old hospital documents, Jide came across an unfamiliar envelope. It was sealed, with no name or address. With trembling fingers, he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words written in elegant script: "Continue the work. Bless others." There was no signature, no contact information, nothing except those 4 simple words. But as Jide read them over and over, he felt something deep within him shift. He finally understood. The men, whoever they were, had never wanted recognition. They had come to serve, to give, to heal. And now, it was his turn to do the same. With renewed determination, Jide and Chidinma committed their lives to honoring the miracle they had received. And though they never uncovered the identities of the 4 strangers, they knew one thing for certain: some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some are meant to be cherished, to be believed in, to be passed down as proof that, indeed, angels walk among us. Jide and Chidinma's foundation flourished, and their story became a beacon of hope for many. However, one evening, as they hosted an event for children in need, Chidinma noticed an old man sitting quietly at the back of the hall. His eyes held a familiar depth, and something about him made her heart race. As the event ended, she searched for him, but he had disappeared into the crowd. That night, she told Jide about the encounter. "I feel like I've seen him before," she whispered. Jide frowned but dismissed it as coincidence. However, deep down, an unease settled within him. The next morning, a letter arrived at their doorstep, no stamp, no address. Inside was a small piece of paper with a single line, "Do not search for us. We are always near." Despite the cryptic message, Jide couldn't shake his curiosity. He revisited the hospital, speaking to the same nurse who had attended to the 4 men that fateful night. This time, she hesitated before speaking. "Sir, something is strange," she finally said. "I remember their faces vividly. But every time I try to describe them, the details blur." Jide felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He retrieved the old CCTV footage once again. To his shock, the once clear images were now distorted, their faces blurred beyond recognition. It was as if they had never existed. The more he searched, the more the truth seemed to slip through his fingers. One evening, Chidinma reached for the small white feather she had kept since that miraculous night, only to find it missing. She searched frantically, turning the house upside down, but it was gone. Jide tried to reassure her, but he, too, felt a growing sense of unease. That night, he dreamed of the 4 men standing at the foot of their bed. They did not speak, but their eyes held a message: "Stop searching. Some answers are not meant to be found." Jide woke up in a cold sweat. The next day, he made the decision to let go of his search. But months passed, and life seemed normal, until Obi fell mysteriously ill once again. This time, the doctors were baffled. His heart, once miraculously healed, showed signs of inexplicable distress. Panic gripped Jide and Chidinma as they rushed back to the hospital, fearing the worst. As they sat in the waiting room, a nurse approached them. "A donation just arrived for your son's treatment," she said. Jide frowned. "From who?" The nurse shook her head. There was no name. Just this. She handed him a small envelope. Inside, a familiar message was written: "Trust in what you cannot see." That night, as they sat by Obi's hospital bed, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Rushing outside, they saw 4 figures walking away, their forms barely visible under the dim hospital lights. Jide called out, but the figures did not stop. When he and Chidinma reached the hallway's end, the men had vanished into thin air. The only thing left behind was a single white feather resting on the hospital floor. Obi's heart rate stabilized that very moment. The doctors had no explanation. Jide and Chidinma stared at the feather, realization dawning upon them. Some mysteries were never meant to be solved. But one thing was certain: angels did walk among them. And they were watching. Always watching. Thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, share this story with someone, like the video, and tell me about your thoughts in the comments section.